Welcome to episode 12 of the Magic Hour. I'm Paul Bevan, the founder and CEO of Magic Valley. My usual offsider, Professor Andrew Laslet's not here today, but I've got a very special guest. I want to introduce Ella Jenkins as our marketing and communications coordinator. Welcome, Ella.
Thank you for having me on.
How are you feeling about today?
A bit nervous. I'm not usually in front of the camera.
A bit nervous? No, you're usually running the show, pushing all the buttons and making sure everything works.
Yeah, so it's a bit exciting.
Absolutely. No, it's great to have you here today. Let's get started and talk a little bit, I guess, about how you came to be working with us at Magic Valley. Obviously, we're not that very old company. We've only been around for about 3 years, but you've been with us for, it must be over, no, not quite
almost a year.
Yeah, coming up to a year. Do you want to talk to us and the audience a little bit about your role as marketing and comms coordinator, and first of all, how that came about?
Yeah, so first of all, how that came about, I was really interested in what Magic Valley was doing, really interested in being a part of it. There's a lot of meaning behind what Magic Valley is doing, and particularly the way that the company itself operates and the mission and purpose behind it. So I was following Magic Valley for a little while, really wanted to get involved, wasn't particularly sure exactly in what way, but having had experience from running my own businesses, I knew a little bit about social media marketing and marketing for a business in general on a smaller scale. So I thought, why not reach out and show what I think I could do to be a part of the business, just to, get involved in some way. I am studying science and I was really interested in bioengineering at the time, but I didn't have experience in that area and I wanted to get involved in some way, and I knew that was something I could do. Honestly, was not expecting a reply back. I was completely shocked. I was just kind of the opinion of, I'll give it a go. I know I could do this. I know it could be really exciting and a really enjoyable thing to get involved with, but I honestly had absolutely no expectations going into it. I was like, worst case scenario, I get ignored. But yeah, it's been great. In terms of what I do, when I started, it was mostly just social media, but it's definitely grown since then.
Right, yeah, absolutely. The driving force behind all of the marketing that we're doing.
Yeah, I've learned a lot during my time at Magic Valley, and I've really enjoyed kind of growing from that beginning of the role to being involved in much more of all of the marketing that we're doing. It's been very exciting.
Excellent. I'd like to dig into that a little bit more, because I think there's a lot of lessons that the listeners can take out of, particularly your approach to us, which I've spoken about in previous episodes, and I'm going to embarrass you again. But we weren't hiring at the time. We weren't looking for someone. And I guess, you can talk to this a little bit better than I can, but, your approach to us was around, hey, look, I think you could be doing this better and I can help you do this better. And I think this is going to help your business in this way, which just stood out from anyone else. We get, I've said this before as well, we get 10, 20, 30 resumes a month of people that want to come and work with us. But that approach stood out. How did you, what made you think of that? Why was that your approach? Because I know you mentioned you have had other businesses yourself.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about that a little bit, how you came up with that idea and why you thought that was the best approach?
Yeah. Running my own businesses was a huge learning experience. It's the kind of job where you really have to, nothing's going to happen if you don't put the work in. So that was a real learning experience. In terms of where I got the idea about that particular approach, I was really interested in getting involved in something that felt related to the direction I wanted to go with my career. And also something that had meaning and purpose that I was passionate about. I was interested in what I was learning about in uni, but I didn't really see where it was going to fit in with a career or where it was actually going. I, didn't get in the lab much because of COVID. So I guess it was a combination of just, I was really interested in what you were doing. I saw the news story come out at the time as well. And that was almost the push for me to be like, no, I've just got to send it. I've just got to put something together, show what I can do and send it. And I knew that sending an email, no matter how passionate you sound, people might want to get you involved, but if they can't see where you're going to fit in, they're not really going to be able to do anything for you. Studying science during COVID, there's not much that's going to make you stand out at all. And there's a lot of different opportunities out there, but it is really hard to make yourself stand out. There's going to be a million different people studying what you're studying, and everyone is going to be passionate about what you're passionate about. And I also knew, like, just coming out and saying, I can do this, there's a lot of, trust to just expect that someone who's talking about their own businesses can actually follow through and do that for your business. So I went specifically to the website. I pulled the photos from the website. I pulled the colors from the photos, and I put together like a little brand pack and put that with my resume, put it in an email, wrote a long email, sent it off and crossed my fingers. And yeah. Yeah.
And here we are.
Yeah. It's been absolutely amazing. I never expected to be here, whatever it is, almost a year later. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, and I think particularly as a small business owner, being able to show what you can actually do is super, super important. And I guess I've got so many questions, but I know a lot of people will be wondering, well, probably one question, how old you are, and you might not want to answer that question because you mentioned that you're studying science, but I think most people, would have or would assume that, you've got several years of experience behind you, if not decades, in marketing, and that you're studying marketing. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because
like my experience there?
Or lack of.
Or lack of. No, that's fair. Yeah, I'm 22. I'm studying science. I'm not studying marketing. It's definitely been something that I've learned on the job, but I do think having that experience studying science has helped fill in the gaps in terms of trying to understand what's actually going on at Magic Valley. When I specifically became interested in science communication, it was through a couple of different classes, but one in particular, it was looking at all areas of science communication, from interpreting studies to writing blog posts and finding ways to communicate to people in a way that actually keeps them interested in an idea that they might otherwise think is boring. So there definitely has been a bit of that involved in my course, and those have been the subjects that I've chosen alongside a major. But definitely more of the practical skills in marketing I learned through running my own businesses outside of uni. And that was probably that was 2020, early 2020 I started that, and kind of periodically ran that through the last couple of years. Yeah.
Spot on. So I can very much relate to that as well in terms of the marketing side of things. I haven't studied, I didn't do marketing at uni or anything like that either. And I've had, a couple of previous businesses, and similar to yourself, everything I've learned about marketing has been self-taught and through experience. And I had a number of corporate jobs, I thought I was really smart and somewhat successful, and I knew everything, and I can run a business and all that sort of thing. Then got into running a business and realised I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. And particularly when it comes to things like sales and marketing and being able to actually get, that hands-on experience, I think is crucial. And I think it's probably a lot more valuable than just studying the theory behind marketing.
100%. I think in some ways it's been an advantage because I've always been ready to learn new things in this job. I've never gone into one of these new roles that I've taken on expecting myself to know everything that I'm doing. And it is kind of interesting going out there and going, okay, how do I learn how to do this? And there's so many resources out there. And I do think having a range of experiences, a different degree, a bunch of different jobs, it definitely helps. And just being ready to learn new things. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I would describe both of us and our experiences as being practitioners. So you're getting that hands-on experience. And not that this is all about me, but just to relay a story. So I obviously had, a martial arts and a gym business. And we went from, handing out flyers out the front of the gym, to just random people to, targeted digital marketing and being able to work through that. But without doing that, because if you do any sort of, marketing courses and things like that, I mean, real estate's another really prime example of, people doing letterbox drops and all that sort of thing, which is just basically like spray and pray, just sending out as much marketing as possible, hoping you hit the target audience. And then after that, obviously I had the finance business, which I took from, an in-person business where I was doing, one-to-one, consultations to doing, a real digital business, a web-based business, and driving traffic from social media channels to the website with really, a targeted approach with all the demographic information, everything that you can target, through Facebook ads and all of that sort of thing. So I think that experience, which you have similar experience with your own businesses and other roles, really is just crucial in any in any business really, but particularly small business, to be able to pick that stuff up. And as you said, have that thirst for learning and test things and like, we'll try this. I mean,
and even in my own, like, from that business that I ran in 2020, going from just, putting stuff up on Etsy to like expanding it to social media marketing, trying out Facebook ads and setting up my own website and learning how to build a website. And then I brought those skills over to my tutoring business. I'd always kind of tutored, just kind of as like a thing on the side. And then I realized that's something I can do, as my main job while I'm studying, and setting up a business for that and actually setting up a website and finding a way of, like actually organizing that for the students I was tutoring. There's always a way you can take something to the next level, but you have to be willing to actually admit that you don't know how to do something and learn how to do it. And there's so much out there to learn how to do that. So yeah.
Absolutely. So many great lessons in that, I think. Obviously, awareness is really important. I mean, in any business, and obviously with what we're doing as well. And you mentioned that you saw, I guess, our initial, mainstream media coverage when it comes to our first, real exposure, which was through, the Channel 9 news segment when we launched our lamb prototype product.
Yeah.
We got some coverage in the AFR at the time as well, and that sort of thing. What was your understanding or knowledge of or experience of cultivated meat prior to that? Had you heard of it? Was it like...
I'd heard of it. Like, I remember years ago, like being in high school and, when you're still working out what you want to do, I knew I was interested in science, and you hear about these new things popping up and you're like, that would be a cool thing to go into. Like, that sounds cool. Like they're doing this, they're doing that. So it was something I'd heard of. But I remember at the time that I found out about Magic Valley, it was actually just because I was interested in what actual biotech is there in Melbourne, like what jobs are out there. And I was just researching businesses in the area, and then I found Magic Valley, and I remember reading the line and going, that can't be right. Like, there's no way they're making that in Melbourne. And I remember specifically talking to a couple of my friends, and it's funny because I had this conversation with them. There were like 3 different conversations. Conversation before where we were just chatting about how interesting it was that there's actually a company in Melbourne doing this, and we were talking about how you guys did it. I didn't really understand it at the time beyond stem cells. I didn't understand the intricacies of induced pluripotent stem cells and the fact that there were companies using FBS and like all the range of different companies that there were in the world. And then I had the conversation with them where I was like, I sent off my resume, I'm giving it a go. And then I had the conversation where I was like, they replied, I'm meeting them. Like, they got every update along the way. It's really funny. But definitely at the time that I found out about Magic Valley initially, like probably maybe a month before I contacted you guys, I was honestly shocked that there were companies doing it already. Like, I knew that it was an idea, and I knew that it was something that technically we had like the technology to do, but I had absolutely no clue that it was actually already going on out there. And even now, it's like my favorite thing to talk to people about, because people don't even know, but they already have such strong opinions surrounding this. It comes out immediately when you bring it up. They don't even know. They're not thinking about it before, but it comes out immediately. But so many people just don't know that it actually exists already. So yeah, definitely one of the big things that we talk about all the time is actually just getting the awareness out there that it actually exists, and also defining it in the right way, because some people know it exists, but they think that it needs to be GMO, or they think that we're cloning animals, or people think it's some kind of Frankenstein, like scary operation. But yeah, once they understand it, it makes a lot more sense and they're a lot more comfortable with it. So yeah, awareness is a big thing that we talk about a lot in our marketing meetings.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of misinformation out there. I'm interested, obviously you're studying science amongst your like peers, I guess. Do they have an understanding, or maybe now that you talk to them about it, around cultivated meat and what that is and the products and everything?
Yeah, so a lot of people who are studying science understand it, or have heard about it, understand the technology behind it, or very quickly understand the technology behind it.
Yes.
But I think that really affects the way that people accept it. So people who are studying science, they're excited about getting involved in all the biotech innovation that's going on. That's the most exciting thing in science at the moment, is biotech innovation. There's a lot going on right now. I think the people that are have less information to fall back on in terms of their understanding of what's going on are more likely to be a little bit more scared about it. But at the same time, I think we underestimate how much science people can understand without a science education. And if they get it explained to them in a way that makes sense, they're very likely to accept it. I think that definitely their understanding of science affects how much they accept it. But there's also so much else going into it as well. There's all these other, it depends on like, what do they think of GMOs already? Or what do they think of veganism? Or what do they think of all these like highly controversial issues that kind of get mixed together and create someone's opinion on this, but it could come out in any way, you know? So yeah, it's interesting. In terms of specifically within my course, it's very mixed. Some people, I think because it's so controversial, people like to have really polarizing views on it. But people definitely are excited to talk about it, that's for sure, which I love. I love hearing people's opinions. I don't mind if someone is going to come out and be like, oh, that's scary, or oh, that's wrong, because I love having that conversation. I'm like, no, let's talk about this. That's okay. We can disagree as long as we can have a conversation about it, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great approach. Up until that point, I think we'd had a lot of industry coverage in terms of media, and I think we had a bit of standing sort of within the industry. But as soon as we got that mainstream media coverage and the continued mainstream media coverage that we've had since then, I think that's been a really large crossover point for us, because, the food tech sort of industry or sector, or alternative proteins or cultivated meat or cellular agriculture, it's still very, very small. And so it's fine to sort of be known in those circles, but we're trying to create a product that's going to change the world. So we have to bring that to the mainstream. And so I think having that, particularly the TV news coverage, it actually provides, or has seemed to provide, a lot of credibility and social proof. And I mean, we still get comments now. Oh, I saw you on Channel 9, last year. To us, that feels like, well, to me, it feels like 15 years ago sort of thing. It's actually not that long ago.
Crazy.
It's less than a year ago. So. We've obviously done quite a bit more media since then that you've been intimately involved in. A lot of, obviously, what we're doing today with the podcast and the content that we're putting out ourselves, and interactions with the mainstream media networks. We've done quite a lot of TV of recent times. There's obviously a lot of articles, radio interviews and all those sorts of things. Do you think there's one, is there something you can put your finger on in particular that you think has probably or potentially helped the most in terms of generating conversations? Obviously, there's been some announcements with, industry-wide and all those sorts of things. Is there anything that comes to mind that, you think has been key in propelling us a little bit? Because we're certainly getting a lot more media attention now.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Look, I think the one that's stood out to me is I had a couple of friends sending me the reel from ABC that they've hosted of us, and they're like, ABC? That's exciting. So definitely there's a lot coming, like the way that people, the different platforms that people, or the different news outlets that people are following, they'll see it on one, but when they see it on the one that they follow more, or the one that they, it's more likely to pop up on their feed. That's always cool when people come to me and they're like, whoa, like this is like real. And I'm like, yeah, I was telling you about it. Like it's going to be big. Yeah. So definitely. But I think the biggest one, the biggest push would have been after the tasting. I think that was really big, because we went from having like a couple of news coverage, a couple of news stories, to like just this intense, like we had a day where we were just like one after the other. And I remember like we were going through that day, like going so fast and working really hard. And then just at the end of the day thinking, oh, wow, I wonder like how, like what's going to happen when this all comes out and what's it going to be like? And it was just super exciting to show people actually tasting the product and actually having people in mainstream media who aren't from our company or aren't people that, we've necessarily like journalists tasting it and giving their honest review of it. That was really cool. I reckon probably that one. Yeah.
I would absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
I think having people taste the product and having, the world see people
Yep.
tasting the product. That's not us,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
so that is external, independent, and giving their, as you said, you know, immediate, honest feedback of the products, I think has been massive for us, because obviously cultivated meat, or the concept of it, has been around for probably 10 years now.
Yeah.
And so to actually see, you know, people that are eating the product,
Yeah.
it makes it a lot more tangible.
It makes it real. Yeah.
It makes it
another
real.
one of those moments that's like, this is actually happening. Yeah.
Exactly. It was very nerve-wracking for me. Let me just put that out there. Obviously having, you know, external people, you know, taste the product, and particularly because we've had, you know, chefs and restaurant owners and food critics, as well as journalists and politicians, but, you know, people that intimately understand, you know, the meat products that we're creating. That was super nerve-wracking, but we did get great feedback.
Danny Valent came in, and that was, I was terrified.
Yeah.
I was just like, she's here, like she's serious, and it was just amazing and so reassuring and so great to like have a food critic come in and review it honestly and like it and talk it up and support it. That was awesome. Yeah. That was really cool.
Can totally relate to all of those feelings. I was experiencing the same thing. Obviously, there's been some, I guess, more news coverage, I guess, industry-wide in terms of, you know, approvals in the US and that sort of thing. And I think that's been a really big booster as well. And we obviously got a lot of questions from, you know, local media, you know, after that happened, which has been great for the industry. And I mean, I expect, the media attention and the coverage to only sort of accelerate, you know, from here as, you know, potentially products come to market in Australia. So I think that's all really exciting. And the feedback, I guess, as you mentioned, you know, we get a bit of mixed feedback, and the thing that I find quite funny as well is when we appear in some of the, you know, news outlets or different channels, people that I would never think would, you know, watch that program or listen to that show come to him like, oh, I saw you on this and saw you on that. It's really, really interesting. I find that quite funny, actually.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've done a number of sort of different projects and some different events that we've done with, like, you know, community events and info nights and those sorts of things. How important do you think that is in getting the message across, you know, to you know, people that potentially haven't heard about, you know, cultivated meat before? Because we obviously use a lot of different you know, channels, you know, in terms of our marketing. You mentioned all the different social media channels. We're quite active. Andrew plugs this every week, but obviously we're very active. When I say we, I mean you, Ella, very active on, you know, Instagram. You know, we've got our TikTok up. We do a lot of content on LinkedIn. We've obviously got Facebook as well. We've got Twitter as well. So we've got all those
now.
and Threads, of course. Yes. How could I forget?
We're on it.
So, you know, we are, I think, you know, quite advanced in terms of, you know, the content marketing we do on those channels, and then obviously the in-person, you know, events as well, and not just tastings, but info nights. I think the first info night we did was really interesting in terms of the amount of people that came along, but just you know, it's fine for me to talk about it. That wasn't the interesting part, but I think the Q&A, which went for a really, really
Over
long
an
time. What do you have any sort of insights into that, or comments on that, or how you think that went, or how important that is in terms of answering those questions?
Yeah, no, that was another big moment for me where I was like, wow, this is really exciting. So that was right at the beginning of when I started, and I was like, I can't believe this is so interesting to be involved in, and so many people really want to be involved in it. That's what I got from that Q&A. So many people really wanted to be involved and have the conversation with you guys. And I think that's what makes those events so important. People want to be involved. People want to understand. So having these events and also having such regular updates on our social media, and we really try and take people behind the scenes, and we really try and familiarize people with our team. I think it makes them, you know, more excited about what we're doing, and it also, like, it involves the community in something that has a real purpose behind it. That's what we, you know, what really motivates us, and we talk about it a lot, that this has the potential to have a really big impact, but we need people to be excited as we are about it as well for it to actually have that impact. So we need to involve people, and people want to be involved. So running these events and being active on social media, I think, is the best way that we can do that. But yeah, that was an amazing event because people were asking really interesting questions, and they were genuinely interested in hearing the answers and getting involved in. And I remember there was even like almost like debate over, you know, I think it was a very like debated idea of, is this going to be halal? Is this going to be kosher? And it just turned into a conversation between the people who were actually there. It's something people have so many questions about, but also want to talk to each other about. And even after the Q&A, people stuck around for networking for like another hour. It was great. Yeah.
It was, I couldn't agree more. And it's really interesting how good the questions were and how, I guess, engaged people were.
Yeah.
And I guess that's and genuine, as you mentioned. The questions were really genuine, about a want to understand and, what about this, but what about, particular concerns and all that sort of thing, which is probably a little bit different to the comments that we get on social media.
Very different.
Which is, I guess that's probably just, a reflection of the world that we live in terms of, I guess, keyboard warrior is a term that, gets thrown around as well. And we get a mix of comments on social media, but I think a lot of that comes from, some of the misinformation that's out there. And you, this was absolutely credit to you for this idea in terms of, addressing some of those negative comments or misconceptions, or we get comments about, we get the ick comment quite a lot, and the not to people, but we get that spewing up emoji quite a bit as well. But, so we get a whole wide range of things, and obviously that. I think those conversations are very different to, as you mentioned, on the info night, for example. People are more engaged and they're genuine. They're genuine questions. But you made a really good point around calling out, or I think as Sam mentioned in one of our previous podcasts, he referred to it as calling in those negative comments and addressing them.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the idea of doing that and why it's important for us to address those negative comments and misconceptions?
I mean, it's the same as having the conversation in person. I think it's so important that two people can disagree on a topic and have a conversation about it and actually listen to each other. And it's almost no different. Obviously, there's a difference between the people who are really, making out there comments, but even some of the out there comments, they always come from a place where they don't understand, or they're scared of it, or they're worried about what's not being told.
Yeah.
And so if you can just kind of look at the comment, see where that comment is coming from, the fear that it's coming from, and actually address that, give them the information, and then they can do with that what they will. Show that we're open to having the conversation, and we see that people are worried, and that's normal because this is a new thing. It's okay to have like a big reaction to something new. This is what we're trying to do. We're being transparent. We're being honest. We're being open. And we did turn some of those, and this is interesting, we turned some of those Instagram comments. We had a look at our comments. We picked out a couple of them and ended up making some LinkedIn posts looking at where is this comment coming from? Like, why is this person so scared of cultivated meat? Or even just I think a really interesting one was we looked at specifically, why are people grossed out by cultivated meat? Like, where is that gross feeling coming from? And if you look into it, it actually goes into, I think we talked about that anchoring bias of people have a set idea of this is what meat is. They know that it comes from a slaughtered animal. They've grown up with that their whole lives. So when we take the definition of meat and put it on something that's not what they're used to, their immediate reaction is to just go, no, that's wrong. That's gross. Or, that availability heuristic, which was the most easily available information on their head. So biotech in food is bad, or that's scary, or this is dangerous. This could, and not actually digging a little deeper. And that's not people intentionally trying to come at us and attack what we're doing. A lot of the time, these people don't think that like the CEO of the company is seeing the they don't think that the person running the social media is seeing the Instagram comments. They're just putting their opinion out there. And if you can't dislike a post, you can comment on it. And then if you're passionate about it, you're gonna comment about it. But these are all just like these, when it comes down to like the psychology of it, they're cognitive biases, and we all have these cognitive biases. They're mental shortcuts that we take. So when they don't understand much about something, people are going to jump to these, immediate, intense reactions. But I think it's so important, both in real life when you're having a conversation with someone who's not into the idea of it, or on social media when people are leaving these hate comments, to be able to have the conversation from our side, sit down, think about it and understand where it's coming from, and use that to inform the way that we're marketing. I don't think that even while doing that, we're never going to stop getting hate comments, because what we're doing is new. But I mean, it shows that people are interested in what we're doing. And even some of those comments, like even other people will reply to those comments for us and explain these assumptions that they're making. And they'll turn around in the comments and actually come around to the idea. So I think people are passionate about it, but that's a good thing, because even if they're passionately angry at it or scared of it, they're interested in it in some way or form. Yeah.
All really great points. And you've taught me a lot of lessons around patience and making sure that we, address these comments, because as you said, a lot of people, have turned around in their opinions, whereas, perhaps previously I would have been a bit less sure and not spent the time to do that. And you make a really great point around the community as well, because even from the beginning, we've had a real want to build that community. And as you said, the community has done a lot of that education work, for us. So it's not us having to be, on Instagram or social media replying to all these comments.
Really
because
nice.
absolutely, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I guess they're really our evangelists, people that are our supporters and are able to counteract some of that misinformation that people will post or things like that, or just question them. Someone will say, "Oh, this is ick," or "This is," whatever they'll say, and other people will be like, "Well, why? Why do you think so? Or how is it different?" Or tell me. So 100%, and that's something I've learned from you, because I was certainly less patient to begin with. You mentioned a number of really interesting points there around people's, biases and fear, and particularly when it comes to food products. Obviously, food's a really, personal, choice, what you consume and put in your body. And we do get some really, strong reactions and strong emotions when we talk about that. And I think, as you mentioned, a lot of that comes from, preconceived ideas or notions. And what's really, I think, challenging for us, we're a tech business, we're a food tech business, and we're producing a product that is a food product. And so there's a lot of emotion around that, and I guess willingness to adopt technology in your everyday life, and particularly when it comes to food.
Yeah.
One thing that I find really interesting is around, how transparent we are around the process. And I think that's really important, for people to know where their food comes from, and for that to be really transparent. And I think, something that is going to come up more and more, because we do get a lot of those questions about, what do you add to the cells, and what are the, what's the ingredients and what's the nutrition profile? And they're all great questions. And I think people should know that, and, what the process is from beginning to end, and what happens in the lab, and all of those sorts of things. But I just wonder how much people put thought into where their food currently comes from.
I was just going to say that. I think that that's the difference. And that might be why people are so immediately scared by it, is because they see us talking about, here's the process from start to finish for this meat product, but they don't really think about the process for the meat product that they're used to.
Yeah.
And maybe if they put that side by side, they'd feel a little bit more comfortable with the meat product that we're making. I saw something really interesting, an article someone wrote on the way that cultivated meat is being adopted around the world, and the way that it comes down to different attitudes surrounding technology and acceptance of new technology, and also things like the idea of something being grown in a lab as being cleaner than something, factory farmed. But I think it definitely comes down to the fact that we're too used to not thinking about where our food comes from currently. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I think, I'm not the expert, but just based on our experience, I think it potentially makes people think about where their food comes from, and I think it might make them uncomfortable. Yeah, and I think that is where a lot of the anger comes from, which is really, really interesting and very misplaced.
Yeah, it definitely is. But people don't like being called out. And also I think these issues, people don't like thinking about climate change. They don't like thinking about animal agriculture because there's a lot of work to be done there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of change that goes into like actually seeing a big difference in these issues. And that's a lot for people to think about on an individual level. They also don't want to be thinking that they've been doing something bad. They don't want to, accept the idea that they've actually been contributing to this really awful issue. And I think that people need to become a little bit more okay with the idea that, there's things that we do every day that contribute to the what makes these issues what makes it so important that we change what's going on in the current food industry and with climate change and with everything. Nobody wants to do bad things or nobody wants to harm animals, but there's certain things that have been set in standard, and it's okay to go, okay, I understand that now. I'm going to learn about this. I'm going to want to understand it, and I'm going to try and find a way to change it. The best thing is that we're giving them an option where they don't have to change very much at all. You still get the food product. But I think what stops people from fully embracing that is that they don't want to accept that what they've been doing, their entire lives has been a part of a really bad issue. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's really important to point out nobody's perfect. Nobody is perfect. And I think it's really important, as you said, to be open to new concepts, learn about different issues that are happening in the world and how you can address those. And it's not it's not something to dwell on. It's more about being open-minded, learning, and then looking at ways that we can improve ourselves, what we're doing as a community, what we're doing all together.
I think people are immediately on the defense because they think they're being called out individually when people are trying to bring about change in these issues. Or they think that if they can't go all in on completely changing how they behave in their life around one issue, if they can't go from eating meat every day to being completely vegan, then they should just give up and oppose it completely. But every single little change, or just thinking about it every day, supporting things like the cultivated meat industry, like there's little things that you can do to contribute to actually making a difference, or actively thinking about things. It changes your perspective on things. Even since I've started working at Magic Valley, I mean, I've never, since moving out of home, been a huge meat eater. I don't really buy it for myself that much, but it's definitely been a part of my diet. And I've tried to go vegetarian a few times. I've tried to, but it's ingrained in your diet and, ingrained in my diet. But seeing it every day at work and thinking about it and using it in the marketing, it makes you think about it. And just thinking about it changes the choices that you're going to go about and make in the rest of your life on a subconscious level, and the way that you think about what you're eating. So I think just the first step, actually acknowledging things and understanding it, will subconsciously change how you act around this type of thing anyway. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Look, obviously in the early days, a question I get asked a lot is around, demand. How much demand is there? And I think that at least in the early stages, demand is going to far outstrip supply.
Yeah.
As you've mentioned earlier, there's only 3 cultivated meat products that are currently available. They're all cultivated chicken, one in Singapore and 2 in the US. And as you mentioned as well, I think now that there's products available on the market, particularly in a market so big as the US, has had a really large impact on people becoming more aware. Obviously, there's media attention around it, but actually it becoming a lot more tangible.
Yeah.
You can actually go now, not just in Singapore, go and buy it and eat and try a cultivated meat product.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the early adopters, will be people that are already interested in the sustainability aspects, particularly, or also I should say, animal ethics and even the health profile, concerned around what nutrition that they're consuming. And I think they're sort of the 3 key areas that the early adopters will come from. But then there's obviously, as you mentioned, there's a really large education piece following that for everybody else. Yeah. But I think those early adopters, again, that's going to provide another really big inflection point when you start seeing more and more people eating cultivated meat products and talking about
And
cultivated
normalising it, yeah.
and normalising it. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Because I think at the moment it's so sci-fi to so many people that
Yes.
it just doesn't even find a place in their brain of like, I have to form an opinion on this, or would I try this? I always ask people that question, would you try it? Like, I'm just interested.
Yeah.
Yeah, but definitely like at the moment, there's going to be no issue. I mean, I've seen posts about those restaurants have been selling out in minutes.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting as time goes on to see how the technology is adopted. I've had really interesting conversations with friends around, especially friends studying biotech, around how they think that it's going to be adopted or how they think it's going to be accepted, particularly comparing it to like the way that GMOs are treated these days. Not that obviously our cultivated meat isn't GMO, but I think a lot of the opinions that people have on cultivated meat come from these strong opinions that they have surrounding GMOs, which I think 99% these days comes from them seeing on packaging no GMOs. They don't even understand what it is. They just know they're supposed to think that that's bad.
Yeah.
But I think the more people understand it and the more people see it and the more people see people who aren't related to these companies eating it, the more normal it's going to become. And I definitely think that as it becomes more available, more people are going to be excited about it. More people are going to want to try it. But it'll just be interesting to see how the conversation changes over that time. Definitely since it's become available in America, I've noticed a huge difference in the number of people that know it actually exists.
Yeah.
Because there, were a lot of people out there who just didn't know that it was actually technology that was going on at the moment. But yeah, definitely just people knowing that it's out there. I mean, I guess that's the first step. A lot of people don't even know if they would try it yet. But yeah, definitely very interesting to see how that's going to change. I mean, America is huge. I was so shocked when that came because it just kind of came out of nowhere. There was the approval from the FDA, but then we were waiting for the USDA for like, what was it? It was the no questions asked thing, and then it just kind of came through to the second part from the FDA and then the USDA, and it was like, wow, it's in America now. That's huge.
Absolutely. And I think that awareness piece is really really crucial because obviously I definitely am in my little bubble of, cultivated meat, and I talk about it to everyone every single day in part of every conversation. But that's not the real world. And then I get outside of that little bubble and then I'm like, oh, hang on, not everyone knows. It's a minority of people that know about it. And
even who understand the word cultivated meat or the phrase cultivated meat. Like I'll sometimes have to specify cultivated meat, like meat grown in a lab. And then people get it. People understand lab grown meat. But yeah, definitely it's a bit of a bubble.
Absolutely. And that's, you raise a really good point around, labeling because, I have the same experience. I'll say cultivated and people don't know what I'm talking about. And fair enough because it's a new term. So it's not to be expected that people will know. And lab grown is not, an ideal marketing term. It doesn't put great images of a food product in your head, but that's what people understand it as. As soon as you say that, they know exactly what you're talking about. So that's a really interesting challenge that we've got coming up in terms of terminology and labeling. And I think you make a really good point, around the stigma attached to things like GMO as well. That's what makes it really important for us and, the companies that are already on the market to get the marketing right. Because if there's a stigma that gets attached like it has done to GMO, it's really difficult to overcome that. And so obviously we do a lot of work around education, and content marketing, to cover off things like the terminology and, why is it cultivated? Well, it's grown in a cultivator. So a bioreactor is also known as a cultivator and we're cultivating those cells. And so, that's why we refer to it as cultivated meat. And as you mentioned previously, we're very transparent with the process. Everyone wants to come to the lab. We accept as many people as possible. We have done a number of tastings. We would like to do obviously more in the future going forward, so people can actually come and try it, which is another crucial step. That goes beyond the communication, obviously being able to, taste and smell and enjoy the product. And obviously, as you mentioned as well before, a lot around the benefits to cultivated meat as well, whether that relates to the environment, the treatment of animals, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Some of the things that we don't talk about, I'm not meaning us, but just in general conversation is around, food safety and security, food
That's
sovereignty.
really interesting to me, yeah.
Absolutely. And things like antimicrobial resistance and all these larger problems, everyone seems to have forgotten about COVID and the pandemic and what we've just been through.
Yeah. And even just things like, the new areas that this opens up to, like, meat can now be made anywhere, and like transport doesn't need to be as much of an issue, and food safety. I mean, like,
Absolutely. And it's a very different experience globally to what we have here in Australia. And I think we've got a global audience in terms of our social media and we market to a global audience, but we are based here in Australia. And I think it's a very different set of opinions locally compared to overseas.
Yeah.
I think as Australians, we've never seen, food safety or food security as an issue here. We've got a really strong, framework and yes, and we do produce a lot of food here as well, and we export a large amount of food. Strangely, we're net importers of some products as well, pork that I've mentioned before. But in Australia, I guess the general feeling is like there's no issue. Why is there an issue around food safety or food security or food sovereignty? But then you go to a country, like Singapore, for example, that just does not have the resources or the land to be able to produce like we produce here. And it's a completely different conversation, a completely different understanding, not only of the benefits of something like cellular agriculture or cultivated meat, but the need for it. As we would have seen through throughout the pandemic, supply chains were so disrupted, and that doesn't apply, just to products or clothes or TVs or making cars but to the food supply chain. And that has drawn a lot of attention, particularly in those countries that don't have food sovereignty and can't produce their own enough food to feed their own population.
Yeah.
And in countries that are experiencing massive increases in population, if we talk about like India and China and those sorts of places, it's a much more pressing issue there, which I guess a lot of people in Australia just are a little bit oblivious to or unaware of, because we have it. We're so lucky here in Australia.
I was going to say, I think it's just something that we've become used to, that you see supermarket shelves that are full and there's always enough food and there's always lots of meat on the shelves, to the point where there's always stuff going off.
Yeah.
And Australians eat a lot of meat as well compared to other countries, and it's just a huge part of the diet here. It's a daily part of a lot of people's diets, and I think that we've become really used to the idea of it being available, and it seems like this, we're talking about some like dystopian future where like you're not going to have food, or and it's not really the case. It's genuine. The population is going to grow. We're running out of space, and it's not going to stay the way that it is. And I think COVID was a really interesting show of that, because I remember even like my little local supermarket, even like the little section, the fridge section, they had just kind of put sheets over two of the meat fridges, and there was just one fridge that had meat still. And I remember there being a lot at the time about how meat was becoming really, really expensive. And it's so complicated because it's got to do with all these different supply chains that are obviously really, really affected when something like a pandemic happens. And it's just, I mean, it's the kind of thing that we're going to see more and more in the future as well. So yeah, and I think it's hard for people to wrap their head around this idea of food security being a benefit of cultivated meat, because it is such a wide scale. It's obviously a far off kind of part of the vision from where we're starting now, and it's going to take time, but it's worth thinking about, because if the support goes into this industry, that is the potential of this technology, and it's the way that things are going to have to change to actually feed people at some point anyway. And things already have changed to like we've been through agricultural revolutions. where we've changed the way that we make food to feed people. There's been a lot of change in the last 50 years in the way that we produce meat. So this is just another part of that change. And it comes with these benefits if it's more ethical. It's going to be more environmentally friendly. But I think because that comes with this attached stigma surrounding like people accepting change around these issues, that it involves them accepting that they've been doing something wrong, they're more likely to kind of not want to have the conversation about this is the full potential of this technology. There's so much here to talk about. But yeah, it's hard for people to comprehend. And I do think it comes from a place where we kind of take things for granted here. We're really lucky. And I think that it takes, really acknowledging what we have with constant gratitude to actually think realistically about the way that this could impact people in different areas of the world as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, food waste is another topic that, you touched on then as well, that we just don't pay enough attention to or put enough, thought into around, addressing that issue, which cellular agriculture can potentially, play a key role in. And I think, talking about supply chain, people forgot. I think people forget there was no toilet paper. Do people not remember that? You couldn't go. I'm getting off topic here, but I think another really good point is around the stigma attached to, and some of the comments we get as well around, these global conglomerate food companies are trying to, change what we eat, and what are they putting into it? And we're not some evil global conglomerate trying to infiltrate the food system of every.
Yeah,
we're a small startup trying to have an impact on the world, and we do, in terms of our content, I think try and get that message across with, the amount of, personal profile type pieces of this podcast, for example. And, I think another key component of that as well is, making sure our, I know it's not their favourite thing to do, but have our scientists, come on and do, as much, media, whether it's on the podcast or whether it's, on TV or in articles and that sort of thing. So people can put a face, to what we're doing. Oh, it's those 7 people at Magic Valley.
It's with it.
Exactly.
That's an interesting part of, and that ties back into the whole, the issue that we have with science communication at the moment. People actually feel like they're not hearing enough. They don't feel like they're being communicated to, and that's what leads to this feeling of like there's a lack of trust there because they feel like something's being hidden from them. And one of the interesting things is the difference when people can connect with someone face to face. So if people can see Andrew on our social media explaining how cultivated meat works, and they can see a face, they can connect with a face, that's a much more human way to communicate with people. It's just a nicer way to communicate with people, and people are going to feel more comfortable with it. But yeah, it's great getting them on the social media and on the podcast, even though it's hard for them sometimes. Yeah.
Definitely not their favourite thing to do. Well, they say it's not. Maybe secretly, I think some of them enjoy it. They're definitely good at it. They're definitely good at it. And I think it really helps as well with, as you mentioned, like communicating the science, because what we do is really technical, and I explain it as simply as I can, and then the scientists will be like, it's not that easy. I'm like, I understand it's not that easy, but we're trying to communicate to people. And I guess one of the tricky things I think has been media coverage is great, but they don't always get the terminology and the technology accurate, and some of that can sometimes take off as a little bit of misrepresentation of exactly what we're doing. And I'm certainly not, trying to point the finger at, journalists or media outlets or whatever. I mean, I think it probably comes back to us to try and explain it a little bit better and make sure we get that across, because, there's so many advantages to cultivated meat and what we're doing and benefits, but there's also quite a lot of differences between what different companies are doing and the approaches that they're taking. I know the question we get all the time, and you mentioned before, is around FBS.
I mean, that's something I didn't understand when I first found out about cultivated meat, and it was only when I read into Magic Valley and I read the website and I read about the process that I actually even knew that was going on. And it's interesting because a lot of people either know that FBS exists and completely write off cultivated meat because they assume that every company is using it,
Yes.
or have absolutely no clue that there's different processes and different ways of doing it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and a lot of the comments we get on social media, like we'll film a specific, piece about us or someone doing a tasting or the process, and we'll get comments like, oh, but what about all the FBS they use? And oh, they're killing animals and they've got animals in cages in the lab. And I'm like, what do you like? What?
Yeah.
What on earth are these people talking about?
Yeah.
None of that obviously is true.
And I think, that comes down to just we need to repeat and repeat and repeat what's going on, because I think what that ties into is that people's understanding of the science, that turns into, that's the ethics of it. Like they need to understand the science to understand the ethics of it, and the fact that every step along the way, our process is really, really careful about the ethics, because that's at the core of what we're doing. We want to actually make an impact there. And when people understand the process, they understand the ethics behind it a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. They're the ones that that's probably where my lack of patience comes from. Particularly when people are just, it's just, and people have, I don't want to go on a rant about social media, but people are very strong in their opinions, and they think what they're saying is fact.
Yeah.
And when people are saying what they believe to be facts about, our company and our business and what we're doing, that's just 100% wrong. I think they're the ones that frustrate me.
Yeah. It's the interesting part of social media is that people cannot even some like, and this is just what social media has done. People cannot understand each other, and they're not willing to understand.
Not
each
willing,
other.
Yeah. I think that's the.
They kind of want to go and see like the worst case possible scenario, and some of these comments are absolutely awful, and it's because these people are so passionate about something that they know so little about, and they don't want to know more about it because they've made up that, and that's the confirmation bias that we've also talked about in some of these hate comments, is that people are going to seek out the things that support what they already feel about cultivated meat. Like I said before, people have these strong opinions about cultivated meat. They don't even know they have strong opinions, but they already have strong opinions, and they come out the moment you talk to them, and they're going to look for whatever supports their opinion on it because that's most comfortable. But yeah, I find the interesting thing about the comments is that they come from all different angles. Like there's some really interesting ones and I think that's a challenge for us to like understand how we're communicating to all of these audiences at once. But
yeah, and I think we're held. I feel like we're held to a much higher standard as
100%.
well, in that people want us to have the answer to everything, and for this to be a perfect product and perfect solution for every possible scenario and every individual person everywhere in every country in the world.
Yeah.
Which is just unrealistic.
Yeah.
So it's some of those questions are really, difficult to provide answers to.
It definitely is.
And I guess one of the other things that, we're cognizant of being a new industry and we're just part of a new industry, is that, some of the comments, particularly around FBS, would be true if they were made about other companies. So, we know other companies, have used and do use FBS. So I guess we feel a bit of a responsibility as well, as part of the industry. We know other companies have done that and are doing that. We don't agree with that.
Yeah.
And so some of the comments I can understand, because people will have read about other companies and they'll just think, oh, that's cultivated meat and that's how it's done. And so I think a lot of the early messaging, as an industry that we do, and I'm really, I pay a lot of attention to what, the companies that have already got approval do in their marketing, because as we mentioned before with, GMO, if there's a stigma, if the earliest companies get the marketing wrong, it's going to create a problem for the entire industry.
Yeah.
And so obviously we talk about ourselves because we know our own process intimately, but we also talk about the industry, as well, and the concept of cultivated meat. And I think that's really important because otherwise, people are going to attach to, the negative things they hear about other companies or the potential practices that other companies might employ that they disagree with, and we might also disagree with. But as an industry, we need to be explaining the concept of the entire process of cellular agriculture and cultivated meat, as well as our own the intricate details of what we're doing, which I think provides another challenge.
That comes back to that point on transparency, and people feeling like they're not hearing enough. So they feel like something's being hidden from them. And if they see, this is what it could be, then of course, then it gets attached to everything. But it is interesting that, people have started associating this with like the industry as a whole. And that's why we try and push as much as possible. We've found a way around this. Like we are doing this without any other animal products apart from those animal cells at the beginning.
Yeah.
And the animal is totally fine after this like tiny little cell scraping. But I think that point about the way that cultivated meat is marketed now is so important. And we think a lot about the way, and I think a lot about the way that I do it and the way that we shape the strategy. And our strategy has changed a lot. Like, do we show the science on social media or do we just show the food? We've gone back and forth a lot. And a lot of my, what's guided that for me has been my conversations with people in real life and what they're interested in hearing. People want to hear the science, and people aren't scared of the science when they understand it. And I agree. I think it's really important that we get it right now because people make their minds up very quickly. And it's a lot of responsibility for like all of the companies that are marketing for cultivated meat at the moment. It's a lot. But that's also a huge motivator, definitely for me, is that if we get this right, if we really work hard at it and we really get the word out there, and every single post we put out there is reaching a couple hundred more people maybe, this actually will have a really huge impact, or this could have a really huge impact in these massive areas, and also show people, here's something that you can support to solve these issues that are giving you so much anxiety that you don't feel you have control over. This is a good thing. I think that's what makes it really exciting, is that there is a lot of work to be done, and it just takes hard work and a lot of thinking and a lot of conversations about it. We talk heaps about it. We go back and forth over what we want to highlight, what we want to show more of. But we always come back to that transparency of showing the science, because I think what scares people more is when they don't see that. They know that it's involved, and we've got absolutely nothing to hide, and we've been so open about our process. We show the lab, and I think that there's something striking to people about the idea of something starting in a lab and then showing people eating that. But that's also the part that is what stops people and makes them really interested in what they're doing, because it is so new and it is so interesting. It's not something you usually associate with each other, and that's a real advantage in marketing, is that we have something that really shocks people and makes them interested and want to find out more. So even though we do get those immediate negative reactions, we get people interested in what we're doing, and we get people looking at what we're doing, and then we can give them the information and then they make up their minds from there. Yeah,
absolutely. There's obviously, I'm going to pick up on a word that you mentioned before, a lot of trust involved, and I think a lot of it, comes back to building that credibility and that trust and being transparent with what we're doing. And definitely agree with you. There's a lot of work involved, and we're only just getting started. Yeah. So it's been a lot of work to get to this point. It really hasn't even started. The work really hasn't even begun, but it is really exciting. It's really exciting, I think, to be, involved, in the cusp of, the beginning of a completely new industry.
Yeah, I love it. It's my favorite part of, working at Magic Valley, is the fact that this is all so new. And it's so exciting to see how it's unfolding. Even since I've started, just the way that the industry itself has changed and how many people know about it, and the fact that it's now available in America and people can go and eat it. That's a huge change. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Things are happening rapidly. I feel like they're standing still, but they're definitely happening rapidly. So, couldn't agree more. There's always something new and exciting happening, either with us as a company or throughout the industry, which has been really great. So, I'm glad that you enjoy it.
Yeah, that's great.
Ella, look, I think we've covered a lot of topics there today. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention today that we haven't covered off it already?
I think we've gone through a lot. I mean, just a huge thank you from me to everyone at Magic Valley for the opportunities that I've had in this job. I'm very grateful for it, to everyone. Very grateful.
Excellent. You don't have to thank us. We should be thanking you. You're an absolute star, and we love having you. So I'm glad it's all worked out well. All right. Well, that probably wraps us up for today, in today's episode of the podcast. Thanks so much for coming in and being on this side of the camera.
Yeah, I'm going to have to edit this now.
Work never ends. There's always something to do. Yeah. We'll have to get you back on for more episodes, I think.
Sounds good.
Excellent. All right. Well, that wraps us up for today's episode of the Magic Hour. Don't forget to check out all our social channels that we've mentioned before. We're everywhere, including Threads, as Ella mentioned. So check us out. If you have any questions, feel free to get in contact with us. As Ella said, we're more than happy to, address people's concerns and provide information around about what we're doing. So please feel free to reach out, and we'll do our best to get back to everyone. So thanks again, and make sure you tune into the next episode of the Magic Hour.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ella.